Defence Minister Angie Motshekga has launched a board of inquiry to look into Iran's participation in the BRICS naval exercises in Salmons Town in the Western Cape this week. In a statement, the department says the inquiry will seek to establish whether President Cyril Ramaphosa's instructions regarding Iran's participation were misrepresented or ignored. Motshekga says the instructions were clearly communicated to all parties concerned, agreed upon, and were therefore supposed to be implemented and adhered to. The Board of Inquiry must establish all the facts and table a report to the Minister in 7 days. A government source earlier confirmed to SABC News that Iran was asked to withdraw from the drills, but the Iranian Covert Nagdi participated in the sea phase exercise. And for more on this, let's now bring in an international relations expert, Mr. Dr Kingsley, and he joins us now via our video link. And Mr. Kingsley, thank you so much for your time, sir, this evening here on SABC News. I mean, let's start off here. We've now seen that the Minister of Defence is under fire, and that pertains to Iran's participation in those naval exercises in the Western Cape and Salmons Town. Firstly, what is your reaction to this latest inquiry which has been launched?
Good evening, Bali. The statement by the Minister raises fundamentally three questions. What were the instructions? And then who was given this instruction? When were this instruction given? And when did the Minister realize that the instructions were not fully complied with? So the Minister did not mention exactly in a statement as to what were the specific of this instruction. She just said it relates to the Iranian participation at this military exercises. So we're still yet to hear the details about that. But one thing for sure, Mbali, that we should really, all of us, agree about is that once the President has issued an instruction to the military can't defy the present instruction. It's a very serious thing if there's indeed any defiance. But given these questions that are coming up from this statement, Bali, we've had in the last few days, actually, this participation of the Iranian has been a subject of speculation in media. The government failed really to clarify as to what are the instructions, what ought to be done. There were a lot of speculations, and there was no communication. I'm just worried, given that, Mbali, that the instructions may be having some challenges, that there was no clarity, there was confusion. I mean, even government refused to respond to some media queries about the exact information on the participation of the Iranians. So it's something that we are yet to see what's going on.
And that brings me to my next question. Is government being truthful in terms of their positioning when it comes to the participation of Iran? Because like you say, the president is the commander-in-chief, and if he issues an instruction, it comes right from the top.
You know, Mbali, I would give you an example of something that happened in 1995. At the UN General Assembly. President Mandela was there. All heads of state were invited to attend a concert at the City Hall, organized by Mayor Giuliani. At that concert, Giuliani then informed Arafat that he's not invited, he must be disinvited. Arafat walked out and Mandela followed. And Mandela called me to say, listen, this is what's happening to Arafat, we are also leaving. He left. So what you don't do, you don't invite people and disinvite them. So what happened in this case? Why were the Iranians not from the beginning, not invited from the beginning? Why would you allow them to arrive in the country with their warships and tell them they're not going to participate? So we need to get more clarity around these issues. Is it maybe the Chinese and the Russian, maybe they did say, if the Iranians are not participating, we're leaving. I don't know what happened. So it's a possible scenario that may have played itself. I'm just worried about our media projection of the Chief of Defense as this recalcitrant general who doesn't take instructions. You may have seen some media clips speaking about him and his last visit to Iran, which later on turns out it was sanctioned. So there are a lot of issues that really need to be clarified in terms of this, that government is not being straightforward, I must say.
And Dr. Makhubela, when it comes to the implications for South Africa, what are the implications, particularly when you look at the participation of Iran while these protests and the killings of people takes place in that country?
You know, Mbali, you may ask yourself, South Africa participated at the military maneuvers last year that was headed by the United States, the Operation Shining Star. And during these maneuvers, there were no questions raised about the neutrality of South Africa or non-allied states of South Africa. The only question that is being raised now is because it's the Iranians. Last year, it was, or 2 years ago, in 2024, it was the question of the Russians and the question of the Chinese. Generally, the Americans are opposed to any military interaction between South Africa, China, and the Russian Federation. It's something that South Africa has to manage because South Africa is part of the BRICS, and this is done within the framework of the BRICS member state, BRICS plus member state. So we really don't know what's happening. That's why I'm saying, Mbali, there must be better communication about these issues so that the public can make its own decision on this, get informed about this. The problem is that it now is being projected as something that the military defied the president. At first, the article was that the Minister of Defense defied the president. So we really don't know what's happening, who defied who. That's why I'm saying the three questions, the what, the who, and the when, would help. And why we're no early intervention to try to nip this thing in the bud earlier on, before even the maneuvers take place. Why this delays?
Yeah.
Is South Africa not doing this because of some level of external pressure where we have actually given up our own sovereignty as a country? We are dictated to by foreign powers in terms of how we interact with the rest of the world.
Yeah, and Dr. Makhubela, I mean, you made a point there saying that the U.S. has an issue when South Africa, engages in military activity with other nations. And I'm sure you've seen the response from the U.S. Embassy in South Africa. And they go on to say that South Africa welcomed Iranian security forces. As they were shooting, jailing and torturing Iranian citizens, engaging in peaceful political activity, and South Africans fought so hard to gain for themselves, and South Africa can't lecture the world on justice while it is cozying up to Iran. What do you make of the response from the embassy here in South Africa?
The United States is certainly the last country to lecture anyone. The United States keeps on pumping weapons into Israel, where children are being killed, where there's genocide going on. The United States yesterday in Bali just approved $3.3 billion in military aid to Israel. So the United States is the last country to want to assume a moral high ground on an issue that everyone in the world, even their allies within the West, are saying what is happening in Israel is genocide, and they keep on pumping weapons there. So it's ironic that it comes from the United States. The only issue is that it is in the strategic interest of the United States. They have a different terminology for it. Now they're quite quick to come on this issue of the Iranian. There's evidence actually that is coming up, even from some media outlets in Israel, that actually there were people who were given weapons in these riots that are going on in Iran. That's why you've seen a high rate of killings. I don't have any lineage or any support for the theocracy in Iran. I'm just talking on the basis of clear rules of engagement and rules of international affairs, how do you deal with each other. In this respect, I really find it very difficult for the United States to issue out this kind of a statement.
All right, Dr. Makhubela, thank you so much for that insight. That's international relations expert and former ambassador, Dr. Kingsley Makhubela. They're just talking about that inquiry which has been launched by the Minister of Defense, and that pertains to the involvement of Iran in that peace, of course, naval exercise taking place in Simonstown in the Western Cape.